Well, today we're talking about parenting. And parenting is important whether you have kids at home or not, because we need to know this stuff. We need to understand what God has to say about parenting, because all of us have influence on people in this world, and the next generation is our most important generation. I want to say two things up front, kind of its introductory matter. So if you will, get out your bare notes and let's look at two key ideas, kind of as an introduction to this talk on parenting. And there's a lot I don't know about parenting, but God has shown me a few things, so I want to share some of those today. But here's the first introductory point. Kids will grow up anyway. Okay? Now that's a good thing to know. If you're their parents, they're going to grow up anyway, whether you're there or not. And so if you're gone as parents, those kids are still going to grow up. That's kind of a freeing idea for me, because it made me realize that God has given me a gift. He's given me this chance to have an influence on kids for a particular period of time. And they would grow up anyway, whether I'm here or not. But since I am here, I have a chance to influence them for good. 1 Peter 4, 7 and 8 says, the end of the world is coming soon. Therefore, be earnest and disciplined in your prayers. Most important of all, continue to show deep love for each other, for love covers a multitude of sins. And if you're a parent, you get this chance to love them and to support them and to guide them. And their path is going to be better because of you. And the love that you give them will cover a multitude of their sins. And so you have that chance. So that's the first thing. The second introductory point is, not only are kids going to grow up anyway, but number two, the goal is adulthood. The goal is adulthood. Grow them up and send them out as fully equipped adults. That's the goal of parenting. Today we have delayed adolescence. Our society intentionally keeps adolescents less mature than they could be. Do you know what the average age now is for people getting married for the first time? For men, it's 30. Can you believe that? It's 30. Just a few years ago, it was 23 for men. It's 30 now, and for women, 27. And so, last week I told the story of Peggy's grandmom. She left home from an alcoholic father, kind of ran away from home, and got married at age 13. And then she had 4 kids right in a row. By the time she was 30, she was getting close to being a grandmother, okay? And so in our culture, we've just delayed and delayed and delayed childhood way into the future. Do you know they didn't even used to have the term teenager? That's a new term. Because it used to be, 100 years ago, when a kid turned 13, 14, right in there, they were full-fledged adults. They were expected to get jobs, work, get married, have kids, and all that. And so now we just kind of spread it out. So how can we build mature adults, fully equipped adults at a young age? In Hebrews 5:12 it says, in fact, though by this time you ought to be teachers, you need someone now to teach you the elementary truths of God's Word all over again. You need milk, not solid food. Now, the writer of the Hebrews is talking about spiritual growth here, but the same principle could be applied just to life in general. We need to build adults. My grandmom would say, your job as parents is to work yourself out of a job. And one mom said, in early childhood, you tie them to your apron strings, and the rest of parenting is untying them step by step. Often we use this continuum for parenting. They're either from strict to lenient. And people will say, well, what kind of parents are they? So, well, they're strict parents or they're lenient parents or something like that. But you know what? That's not the right continuum. It's not a question of strict or lenient. It's a question of what does it take to produce adults? How can we turn out kids who leave home and are fully functioning, fully equipped adults making wise decisions just like wise adults would make? So let's look at a few key ideas today about next level parenting. And let's see, what does it take to make great kids in this world? So point number one is the word safety. We're going to look at a few key words here. The first one is safety. Neuroscience tells us that our brains are hardwired for relationships. We talked about that a lot around here. And if you build in your home a safe environment, because our brains are hardwired for relationships, people will naturally be drawn together. If in a marriage you build a safe, emotionally safe environment, marriages will be drawn together. If you build a safe environment in your home, kids will be drawn to their parents, kids will be drawn to each other, kids and parents will be drawn to their kids. It's natural. We were made that way. But can we build environments of safety? That means safe from abuse, safe from judgmentalism and nagging and blaming and criticism. In Colossians 3, 7 and 8 and verse 12, it says, "You used to walk in these ways, in the life you once lived. But now you must also rid yourselves of such things as anger, rage, malice, slander, and filthy language from your lips. Therefore, as God's chosen people, holy and dearly loved, clothe yourselves with compassion and kindness and humility and gentleness and patience." Maybe you were this way if you got married, when you first got married. Maybe you thought, there's some things about my spouse that aren't just perfect, but, I can probably change them over time. I can probably, through criticism and judgmental, I can probably make them different, right? We all thought that. You know by now this does not work, right? Okay, you can't criticize people into the behavior that you want them to, because criticism is a trap. It keeps relationships from going deeper because you're ruining a safe environment. But there's another part of this trap. When you criticize, it keeps you from looking inwardly at yourself. I mean, as long as you're focused outward on finding fault in every other person, you can't find fault in yourself. And so not only are you keeping relationships from going deeper by your criticism, but also judgmentalism and that sort of thing, it keeps you from looking at yourself. And so now you can't become a better person, which is the goal of the whole thing. It's a dangerous game. But what Colossians says is that what we should do is fill ourselves with compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience. I want to read for you this article I read. It's a study. It's from Duke University Med School. It was in 2010, and it was a study they had done over about 35 years or so. So here's what they did. They took 500 babies, 8 months old, and they sat down in an interview and evaluation session to find out what kind of parents they had. And specifically, they were looking for, are the parents affectionate and loving? And so they rated them on a scale of 1 to 5. And so 1 would be not very affectionate, 5 would be very affectionate. And then they got all 500 of these who they could find 35 years later, in their 30s, and they wanted to see, how did these kids turn out? Here's what they discovered. For the ones who had high levels of affection and a safe environment in their homes, they were less stressed, less anxious. They were less likely to report hostility, distressing social interactions, psychosomatic symptoms. They had improved academic performance, better parent-child communication, and better self-esteem. On the other hand, those who grew up in homes where there was less affection, these children had lower self-esteem and felt more alienated, hostile, aggressive, and antisocial. It's interesting I love it when people do these kinds of studies, because we can actually see the results of what the Bible talks about when it says, clothe yourselves with compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience in your own home. That's the first thing. That's safety. Let's look at number 2. Number 2 is responsibility. Responsibility. Now, there are huge changes that take place in the parent-child relationship during the years. Because in the early days, you're required to give total parental control over children. You need to protect them as infants. You need to protect everything about them. Total control. But then, over time, you kind of move from total control to more of a coaching environment as you're setting limits for them and wanting them to fly, wanting them to discover their world within certain limits. But then, as they get older and about ready to leave home, you move to more like a guidance counselor or a consultant. And here's what we wanted for our kids. We wanted them 2 years before they left home to go to college. We wanted them to be fully functioning adults. We wanted them to make all their own decisions, and we wanted them to hopefully, be at the place where they could leave and they've already had 2 good years under their belt of making all their own decisions so that they would not crash and burn when they went off to college, but they would be good adult decision makers. In Luke 16:10, it says, "Whoever can be trusted with very little can also be trusted in much. And whoever is dishonest with very little will also be dishonest with much." So, how do you learn to make good decisions so that you can be trusted? You know how you learn to make good decisions, right? By making bad decisions, right? That's the way it works. Now, you can tell your kids 1,000 great things, and they'll pick up some of them, but mostly they learn good decision making from making bad decisions. And we as adults today, we do the same thing. We learn mostly from the bad decisions that we make. I mean, how many times you heard somebody say, "Yeah, we're not going to do it that way because let me tell you what happened to me 20 years ago." And we've learned some things along the way. And so now we make good decisions because of those bad decisions. What we wanted for our kids is we wanted them to have plenty of bad decision making while they're still in the safety of our home so that they would already have learned good decision making before they leave. In Proverbs 22:6 it says, "Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it." Now, it says he or she should go because every child is different. And you as the parent, you're the only one who really understands your child. You're the one who has to figure this out about holding them close to the apron strings early on and then continually letting those apron strings out until the point at which they're gone and totally independent. Now, I want to mention 3 what we might call parenting styles, okay? One of them is the over-functioning parent, sometimes called the helicopter parent, to zoom in and save the child out of every trying situation. Sometimes called the lawnmower parent. That is, you mow the lawn in front of them. You smooth the way in front of your kids so that they never encounter any problems. Now, you know why we parents would love to be lawnmower parents. It's because of the pain that we suffered in childhood and young adulthood. And we would love our kids not to have to face those same problems. So we want to pave the way for them so that they have no problems. But they got to learn. We can't steal all of their learning opportunities from them. The over-functioning parent. Like, for example, let's say your kid just gets their driver's license. Like one weekend, they get a speeding ticket. You say, "Oh, it's okay. Those cops, they're always so aggressive about those speeding tickets. But look, Daddy will pay your speeding ticket for it, and you just hopefully you won't have to pay any more of these things." Now, how about that for being stupid, right? Okay, no, you want them to experience real-world consequences. They got a speeding ticket, it's $120. They got to figure out how to get a job and pay for that speeding ticket, right? That's real-world consequences. That's what they're going to face the rest of their lives. They need to start real-world consequences early on so that by the time they leave home or by the time they get their driver's license, they already understand that they're responsible for their lives. Responsibility. By the way, for the over-functioning parent, do you know what the subtle message that the kid receives from that is? That you're going to swoop in and save them out of every problem? That you're going to pave the way for them so that they don't have any problems? The subtle message is, you are so fragile, you can't make it in this life without me. And the kids pick up on that. And they know they're being trained to be fragile in life. Because they've always got somebody standing beside them, taking care of every problem that ever comes up. And so that's the over-functioning parent. Now here's another one, the over-controlling parent. Okay, the over-functioning parent is always swooping in to help. The over-controlling parent is wanting to tell the child everything the child needs to do. Now, that's great when they're toddlers, to tell them everything they need to do. But as they grow older, that needs to back off. Because here's the situation. Telling a child everything they need to do, it means that what you want for that child is you want a voice on the outside to come into their ear to tell them what to do. And then they'll do it. Now, let me give you an example. My dad got a sports car about the time I got my driver's license. And so occasionally he would let me drive it. And fortunately, I was at least wise in this one situation, not in many others. But so when I was driving his car, people would pull up beside me and want to race. They pull up and, and do that sort of thing. But I never did. Why? Not because I thought, well, if I race, somebody will find out and I'll get in trouble. That's not why I did it. I did it because, fortunately, I had a little wisdom here. I thought, what idiot would race on a city street and somebody's going to get killed? You see, fortunately, I had a little bit of wisdom as an idiot 16-year-old, and and I knew that was a stupid thing to do. What we don't want for our kids is to think, well, I might get in trouble. Somebody told me not to do that. I might get in trouble. We want them to be wise in their hearts. We want them to have wisdom in their minds. We don't want them to be thinking, somebody told me not to do that. Now, here's the problem with the over-controlling parent, is they will listen to you, and they'll do exactly what you say if you're going to kind of control everything about their lives and tell them what to do. The voice is going to go in their ear, and they're going to do it. Here's the problem. When they turn about 13, they're going to switch that voice in their ear from you to their friends. And they're not going to listen to you anymore. They're going to listen to their friends. And they're going to do whatever their friends tell them because you have trained them to do exactly what somebody tells them who's important to them. And what we want to do is build kids who are wise on the inside, who are smart, who know how to make good decisions, and will do that. So, we talked about over-functioning parent. We talked about over-controlling parent. The third one is a consultant parent. A consultant gives the responsibility to the client. That's the way consultancy works. And so you ask questions like, well, do you think there might be another way to do that would be better? I wonder if it would be more effective if you tried it this way. Or sometimes I've done it this way. That's maybe an idea that you could try. So you want to, by the time they're ready to leave home, you want to already be in the consultant mode, so that they're making their decisions and they're being wise like a young adult. Okay, ready to move to another word? It's control battles. Now this is a good one. All right, we're going to have some fun here. Control battles. What about control battles? Because, man, every parent deals with those kind of things. Now, let me just say as a general theory, the goal would be to stay out of control battles as much as you can. But the other part of this theory is when you're in a control battle, the parents have to win because you're the adult. So you got to win. I'm standing in line at Walmart, and this person in front of me is saying, don't touch that. Quit that. No, you can't have that. I'm not buying that for you. Okay, go ahead. You can touch it. It's fine. Okay, sure. I'll buy it for you. Here, put it up here on the counter. I'm like, man, in 7 seconds, this person has already lost 3 control battles. That's terrible for the kids. Now the kids are in charge of the family. What 4-year-old wants to be in charge of their family? That's a heavy burden to bear. It's a tough thing for them. So, let's talk about eating, okay? I've got a little story here from Jim Fay, who is he's a school teacher, principal, that sort of thing, and just real smart about parenting issues. He told about a little 6-year-old he saw at a restaurant, and the parents were trying to make him eat so they could finish shopping. Okay, so that's the scenario. He's watching this. They yelled at him, and they cajoled him, about eating their food. The mom was getting really ticked. So she started stuffing the hamburger in his face. But no chewing was going on. He was just filling up his mouth. And then the dad got in the act, and the dad said, if you don't eat this, we're going to leave you here, and you won't have parents anymore. Okay? But there's still no eating. Now, Jim Fay said, here's what I could see, is they were stuffing burger into his mouth on one side. He was smiling on the other side. They couldn't see that side, but he was like, yeah, I'm going to show these parents they can't make me eat. And so he was in control of the family, and he loved it. And then the dad stood up and said, that does it. We're leaving, and the cops are going to come and take you away when they see you just sitting here by yourself. But the kid knew they weren't going to do that. So simultaneously, the kid gains control and yet loses his own self-esteem because it scares little kids to death to know that their parents are such weenies that they can't even handle a simple dinner together, okay? What our goal is to help kids think. You know what? On this dinner thing, all you got to do, if they want to eat dinner, if they want to eat lunch, just say, you don't have to eat lunch. You can eat if you want to, but this is what you're going to get, and we're going to eat again at 6 tonight. It's your choice. Just leave the decision with them. They know when they're hungry, and if they want to wait till supper to eat, they'll be hungry by then. Okay. Now, let's see. Colossians 3:21. Fathers, do not embitter your children, or they will become discouraged. All right, let's talk about another issue on control battles, bedtime. That's a biggie, right? Bedtime. Okay, here's what Jim Fay said about his own family. Here's how he worked through the bedtime issue. He said, I would always yell every night. He said, for like 6 years in a row, every night I went in there and stood in the door and I yelled at them, you guys get in that bed right now. And if you don't get in that bed right now, there's going to be big trouble around here. He said, so every night I went through this routine. One of my friends said, Jim, do you think it's possible to force another person to go to sleep? Well, I hadn't thought about that, he said. Do you think it might be difficult for your kids to go to sleep while you're yelling at them all the time? He said, let me ask you another question. I'll tell you a secret. Think about this. It's far easier to wake them up. Maybe you're putting your energy in the wrong place. So, I apologize to my kids, he said. I'm sorry, kids. I've been meddling in your lives. I've been trying to tell you when you're hungry and when you're not hungry. I've been trying to tell you when to go to the bathroom. I've been trying to tell you when you're tired. I've been trying to tell you when you're going to sleep at night. And so I'm going to get out of that, but you can just remember 2 simple rules. And I'll never hassle you again about sleep at night. Rule number 1, at 8 o'clock at night, that begins Shirley's and my, Jim said, private time. So I don't want to see you or hear you, but you can go to sleep when you want to. Rule number 2, we get up at 6 o'clock every morning. And so I'll see you at 6 o'clock, so loving kiss, off to bed. So for the first time that night, after 8 o'clock, they had some peace around the house. But he noticed at 10:30, the light was still on in the room. And he had 3 boys, they were like 6, 8, and 10. And so he poked his head in the door, just trying to be, model good behavior, and he said, hey, well, I'm going to bed now. I don't want to be grouchy in the morning, so I'm going to get a good night's sleep. Well, at 6 a.m., the light was still on. Now, they were all asleep, but they left the light on. They had fallen asleep. One kid still had his clothes on. He said, but I discovered something. It really is a lot easier just to wake them up. He said, all I had to do was just turn the radio on real loud, and they all woke up. But we discovered something far more important that morning. We had been stealing from these kids. Stealing these wonderful opportunities for them to grow and to learn. 3 bleary-eyed kids, they were saying, I'm too tired to go to school today. Now, when they would have said that in my old way, he said the old technique that I got from my dad, and he got it from his dad, and he got it from his dad who brought it over from Ireland. Okay, he said, here's that technique. I'll display it for you. Sure, you're tired. What do you expect? I tried to tell you these things, but you're so smart. You know all the answers. What's the matter with you? Things go in one ear and out the other. And when are you going to pay attention? You'll pay attention just once. Maybe you'll learn something. And then you're going to go to school and you're going to wipe that look off your face. Okay, he said, that was the old me. He said, anger, threats, and lectures. So that morning, I started with a new style. 2 things. Empathy and consequences. Empathy and consequences. I was sad with them that they were so tired. But they had to realize it was their consequences of staying up half the night. And so it only works if you use both. You got to have empathy and say, man, so sorry. So he said, I just put my hand on him and I said, for sure, guys. Boy, that's what happens to me too when I stay up too late. Wow, it's going to be a long day at school. I bet you're going to be miserable. Well, you just try to have as good a day as you can under the circumstances, and I'll see you when you get back home. So they're living with the consequences of their decisions, real world consequences. And instead of me being mad at them, I'm just sad with them and just saying, man, that's tough. That's the same thing that happens to me when I stay up late. So little Charlie, the youngest one, 6.5 years old, right after supper, he said, I think I'll go to bed early tonight. He said, as soon as I stopped yelling at them, they had learned the lesson in one day. He said, I couldn't believe it. And so from that point on, we just get up at 6, and they always go to bed on time. Control battles. Proverbs 11:29. The fool who provokes his family to anger and resentment will finally have nothing worthwhile left. If you build a home on anger and threats, they will carry that interpersonal style into all their relationships. Okay, next one. Who has the problem? You ready for another one? Who has the problem? There are 2 kinds of problems in your family. Problems that affect me directly and problems that do not affect me directly. So you got to sort out which one's which. For example, Loud noise in the car, and I'm driving. Does that affect me directly? Yes. Okay, so riding in the car, here's what we always did. Once we learned this, which took years, but anyway, once we learned this, we'd say, hey, it's not okay. This is a quiet car. It's not okay to yell in the car because I have to drive. And if I have to be, like, you know, we used to have one hand on the wheel and the other hand, you know, slapping in the back seat, right, in the car seat. All right. So instead now it's like, no, this is a quiet car. And if you want to ride in the car, you have to be in the quiet mode. Now, if you don't want to ride in the car, you can yell and scream. That's fine. But if you want to be in the car, this is a quiet car. And so you say, well, when you said that, then what happened if they yelled and screamed? Well, we stopped the car and they got out. And we drove right beside them as they walked along the side of the road. Now, we only did this in safe neighborhoods. But anyway, we just drove and we walked beside. We did this numerous times. But see, there is no screaming and yelling on my part. I'm just saying, no, this is just a quiet car. And if you want to, you know, loud people are on the outside, quiet people on the inside. You don't have to yell. You don't have to scream. You don't have to get mad. You can just be very calm and just do real world consequences. In Ephesians 6:4 it says, and now a word to you parents. Don't keep on scolding and nagging your children, making them angry and resentful. Rather, bring them up with loving discipline the Lord himself approves, with suggestions and godly advice. Now, those are problems that affect me directly. What about problems that do not affect me directly? What do I do about that? Like losing school books and clothes. You might say, well, wait a minute, that affects me directly. I have to pay for that. Well, how about you become the parent who used to pay for those things? Okay? So they lose their school books. Like, say, bummer, you know, I hate that. You lost your school book. How much do you think that's going to cost for you to buy another one? You don't have to get upset. You don't have to get worried. You just say, that's not something that affects me directly. That's your deal. Just figure out a way and you can do it. Real world consequences, helping them become adults. They're going to face real world consequences the rest of their lives. Let it start at home and they'll learn it well. Let's look on the back. Number 5, God. God. Remember, faith is more caught than taught. Now, Timothy, who was Paul's champion for Christ, here's what Paul wrote to him about his life and his growing up. He said, Timothy, I remember your genuine faith, for you share that faith that first filled your grandmother Lois and your mother Eunice, and I know that same faith continues strong in you. You can't tell your kids to have faith. They can just catch it from you, from your faith. You can't force your kids to learn from the Bible, but when they see you reading the Bible, it tells them how important the Bible is. You can't make your kids pray, but when they see you pray, they will learn how to pray because faith is caught, not taught. Listen to Psalm 78, 5 through 8. He decreed statutes for Jacob and established the law in Israel, which he commanded our ancestors to teach their children. So the next generation would know them, even the children who are yet to be born, and they in turn would tell their children. Then they would put their trust in God and would not forget his deeds, but would keep his commands. And they would not be like their ancestors, a stubborn and rebellious generation, whose hearts were not loyal to God, whose spirits were not faithful to him. Last week, if you remember, I mentioned that if Satan wanted to ruin your life, all he had to do was get to your great-grandfather and ruin your great-grandfather's life, and he would just pass it down generation to generation so that you would grow up with all this baggage that you carry with you. Well, guess what? Now it starts with you. If Satan wants to ruin your great-grandchildren someday, all he's got to do is get to you, and you'll pass those negative effects, that dysfunctional environment, to your children, to their children, and to their children. So we can be the ones to change it. We can be the ones to change it all so that the next generations will be champions for Jesus Christ. That's our goal. Let's create some champions for Jesus Christ. That brings us to our last one, promise. Number 6, promise. And this is the last verse in the Old Testament. You want to know what the last verse in the Old Testament says? It talks about a coming day when the Messiah is going to be here. He will turn the hearts of the parents to their children and the hearts of the children to their parents. You see, your ceiling, as high as you can go in this life in maturity, that can be their floor. That can be what they stand on. We stand on the shoulders of both generations who have come before us, but now our kids get a chance to stand on our shoulders. And our ceiling can become their floor, and they can start in a brand new place so that they can become champions for Jesus Christ. Let us become the generation where the next generation can stand on our floor, on our shoulders, and become champions for Jesus. Let's pray. Our Father, we recognize, Lord, that parenting is a challenging thing, and influencing families and kids is a challenging thing, whether we have kids at home now or whether we just have some relationships with other kids, with grandkids or aunts or uncles or kids and nephews and that sort of thing, or even just kids in the neighborhood. I pray, Lord, that you would help us be the kind of people who could raise up boys and girls, men and women, who can carry the love of Jesus Christ to our world as his champions. This is our prayer. In Jesus' name, amen.